What happens when one of the most quick-witted actors in Hollywood walks onto a daytime talk show known for tough political debates, and the conversation turns sharper than anyone expected? Make sure to subscribe to Echo Stars and like and comment for more talk show coverage. The cameras are already rolling. The music fades. The audience is clapping loudly as Robert Downey Jr. walks out smiling, waving, that familiar charm switched on. He's relaxed, dressed sharp but casual. He hugs a couple of the hosts before taking his seat at the table of the view. Whoopi smiles first. "It's always good to see you." Robert laughs. "It's always good to survive coming here." The audience laughs. A light moment. The tone feels easy. Sunny Hostin leans forward slightly. "You say survive, why survive?" Robert shrugs playfully. "Because you all ask real questions. It's not just, tell us about the movie. It's, tell us about your soul." More laughter. The energy is warm. Joy Behar chimes in with a joke about therapy bills. Applause. It feels like a typical opening. They start with the new film he's promoting. Whoopi asks about preparing for the role. Robert answers thoughtfully, talking about discipline, sobriety, growth. The audience listens closely. There's a sincerity to him. Sunny nods. "You've spoken a lot over the years about accountability. About owning mistakes." Robert nods calmly. "Yeah, that's kind of my life thesis." "And that includes public accountability?" Sunny presses gently. He pauses half a second. "Ideally, yes." There's a slight shift. It's subtle, but you can feel it. The audience quiets just a bit. Sunny continues. "Because some critics say that Hollywood has been very forgiving to certain actors, while others don't get that same grace." Joy tilts her head. "We're not naming names yet." A few nervous laughs. Robert smiles, but it's tighter now. "Okay." Sunny keeps her tone even. "Do you think you've benefited from that?" The audience reacts softly, a mix of oh and attentive silence. Robert leans back. "Benefited from forgiveness?" "From the industry welcoming you back," Sunny clarifies. He nods slowly. "I think I benefited from doing the work. I didn't just show up and say, 'Hey, I'm better now.' I spent years rebuilding my life." Whoopi jumps in gently. "That's true." Sunny nods but doesn't back off. "But there are actors, particularly women and actors of color, who say they don't get that same runway." The air tightens again. Robert folds his hands. "Are we talking about me specifically or the system?" Sunny, "Well, you're here." A small ripple of laughter, but it's uneasy. Robert exhales through a smile. "Okay, I can only speak for myself. I messed up publicly. A lot. And I paid for it. Legally, professionally, personally." Sunny interrupts slightly. "But you came back stronger than ever." "Yes," he says firmly. "After consequences. After prison. After losing jobs." Joy jumps in. "That's true, he did lose jobs." Sunny nods. "Absolutely. But some would argue the comeback narrative is easier to sell when you're already part of the Hollywood inner circle." There it is. The real tension begins. Robert's expression changes, not angry but focused. "Sunny," he says calmly, "if we're going to talk about systemic inequality in Hollywood, I'm with you. It exists. But if we're talking about whether I personally orchestrated some preferential treatment, I didn't." The audience claps lightly at that. It's not loud, more supportive murmurs. Sunny responds, "No one said you orchestrated it. But do you acknowledge that it may have worked in your favor?" He pauses, a beat too long for comfort. "I acknowledge that I was given opportunities. And I acknowledge I had people who believed in me. But I also know I showed up every day ready to prove they weren't wrong." The applause is stronger now. Whoopi nods approvingly. "That's fair." But Sunny isn't done. "Do you think an actor with your history, same charges, same behavior, but without your background would have had the same second act?" The audience gasps lightly. It's not hostile, just surprised. Robert leans forward now. "Probably not." The audience quiets instantly. Sunny blinks, slightly caught off guard. "So you admit," he holds up a finger, not aggressively, but to finish his thought. "Probably not. But that's not a confession of privilege. That's an indictment of the industry." There's a wave of applause. Joy raises her eyebrows. "That was a good line." Sunny smiles faintly but presses again. "But you were part of that industry." "And I still am," he replies. "Which is why I try to use whatever voice I have to support change." Sunny crosses her hands lightly. "Some would say you don't speak out enough." The audience reacts louder this time. That one lands heavier. Robert's jaw tightens slightly. He keeps his composure. Speak out on what specifically? On racial equity in casting. On pay gaps. On systemic bias. He nods. I've supported initiatives privately, Sunny interrupts. Privately? Yes, he says firmly. Because sometimes the work matters more than the announcement. The crowd murmurs, split reactions. Whoopi interjects, sensing the rising heat. Let him finish. Robert continues, calm but firmer now. Not everything is a press release. Some of the most meaningful conversations I've had were off camera. Sunny tilts her head. But public figures have influence. And they also have branding teams, Robert replies quickly. And sometimes the loudest voice in the room isn't the most effective one. The audience claps again, louder this time. Joy leans toward Sunny. He's not wrong about that. Sunny smiles, but there's tension behind it. No one's saying he's wrong. We're asking if it's enough. Robert shifts in his chair. It's never enough. That's the point. Growth isn't a destination. There's silence, not awkward, but intense. Whoopi nods slowly. Okay. The segment was supposed to be light. You can feel it's not anymore. Sunny takes a breath. I respect your journey. I really do. But some people feel that Hollywood redemption arcs are selective. Robert looks directly at her now. They are. Another quiet gasp. And that's a problem, he continues. But I didn't design that system. I survived it. The audience applause grows stronger, this time sustained. Sunny tries to pivot slightly. So what responsibility do you take? I take responsibility for my actions, he cuts in gently but clearly. Not for an entire industry's historical failures. The room reacts loudly now, applause, a few whistles. Whoopi raises her hands slightly. Okay. But the temperature has changed. Robert isn't smiling anymore. He's composed but sharp. Sunny looks steady, but the exchange has clearly shifted from curious questioning to something more confrontational. And you can feel, this isn't over yet. The applause dies down slowly, but the energy in the studio doesn't reset. It lingers. You can feel the audience leaning forward instead of settling back. Whoopi clears her throat lightly. Okay, we're having a real conversation. Robert nods once. That's why I'm here. Sunny doesn't look away from him. And we appreciate that. But real conversations mean real follow-ups. Joy shifts in her chair. This is why I love live TV, she mutters, half joking. A few audience laughs break the tension for half a second. Sunny continues. You said you survived the system. Some people would argue you didn't just survive it, you thrived in it. Robert folds his hands on the table again. Calm. Measured. After losing everything first. Sunny, but you regained everything. Robert, after doing time. After being uninsurable. After studios wouldn't touch me. Sunny nods. Yes. And that redemption story is powerful. But for many people watching, especially people from marginalized communities, they don't see that same door reopening. There's soft applause from part of the audience. Robert listens carefully. He doesn't interrupt this time. Sunny leans in slightly. So when you say you didn't design the system, fair. But you are now one of its most powerful beneficiaries. The room goes quiet again. Joy jumps in quickly. Let's be clear, we're not putting Hollywood inequality on his shoulders. Sunny responds calmly. No, we're not. We're discussing responsibility that comes with influence. Robert nods slowly. Okay, that's fair. That catches some people off guard. He continues. Influence comes with responsibility. I agree with that. The question is how you exercise it. Sunny, publicly. Robert smiles faintly. Sometimes. Sunny, why not consistently? The audience murmurs again. Robert tilts his head. Because I'm not a politician. Sunny responds immediately. No one's asking you to run for office. Light laughter from the crowd. But you have a platform that reaches millions, she continues. When you speak, it moves markets. It shifts conversations. Robert's tone sharpens just slightly. And when I speak recklessly, it can also polarize and derail causes. That earns applause. Sunny doesn't flinch. Is speaking about racial equity reckless? No, he says calmly. But pretending social media statements equal structural change can be. A louder reaction now, some claps, some sounds. Whoopi nods thoughtfully. That's a point. Sunny crosses her arms lightly. So are you saying public advocacy doesn't matter? I'm saying it's one tool, Robert replies. Not the only one. Joy leans toward Sunny. He's basically saying tweeting isn't activism. The audience laughs louder at that. Sunny allows herself a brief smile but returns to him. Let me be direct then. Have you used your leverage to demand more inclusive hiring on projects you're part of? There it is again. Direct. Specific. Robert pauses. Not defensive, thinking. Yes, he says finally. Sunny, can you give an example? He exhales lightly. On my last 2 productions, I pushed for broader casting searches and more diverse department heads. Sunny raises an eyebrow slightly. Pushed or required? The audience reacts again, sharper this time. Robert looks at her carefully. Collaborated. Joy interjects quickly. Okay, now we're parsing verbs. Laughter spreads, but the tension doesn't fully break. Sunny presses. Because collaboration sounds softer than requirement. Robert nods. It is softer. Because filmmaking is collaborative. If I walk in making ultimatums, I lose allies. Sunny responds immediately. But if you don't, nothing changes. A few claps. Robert leans forward now, more engaged. Change also happens when people don't feel attacked. Sunny, accountability isn't an attack. Robert, it can feel like one when it's public and performative. The audience splits again, half clapping, half silent. Whoopi steps in. Let's not make this personal. Sunny shakes her head slightly. It's not personal. It's cultural. Robert nods slowly. I agree the culture needs work. Sunny, then why not be louder? There's a pause that feels longer than it is. Robert's voice lowers just slightly. Because I've learned that being loud isn't the same as being effective. The room quiets. Completely. Sunny studies him. Or is it more comfortable? A sharp inhale from the audience. Joy, whoa. Robert doesn't smile this time. Comfortable, he repeats. Yes, Sunny says steadily. Is it more comfortable to stay measured rather than risk backlash? Robert takes a breath. You can see the calculation. Not anger, control. I went to prison, he says evenly. I've lived backlash. The audience reacts strongly, applause building. Sunny nods once. That was about personal behavior. And public perception, he replies. And media narratives. And consequences. Whoopi adds softly, he's not wrong. Sunny holds her ground. We're talking about using your current position. And I am, Robert says firmly. Just not always on Twitter. The audience laughs lightly again, but it fades quickly. Sunny doesn't laugh. Social media is where conversations are happening. Robert responds quickly this time. It's also where nuance goes to die. A louder burst of applause now. Joy grins. That's true. Sunny leans back slightly, reassessing. So you think the demand for public statements is misplaced? I think the demand for constant public statements is, he says. Sometimes silence isn't apathy. It's strategy. The audience murmurs again. Sunny responds carefully. Silence can also be interpreted as indifference. Robert nods. Yes, it can. That's the risk. Are you willing to take that risk? She asks. There's a long beat. Yes, he says. The answer lands heavy. Sunny tilts her head. Even if it disappoints people who look to you as an ally? Robert's jaw tightens slightly. I'd rather disappoint people with honesty than please them with performance. The audience erupts, this time louder than before. Sustained applause. Joy raises both eyebrows. Okay. Whoopi lets the applause ride for a few seconds before speaking. This is why we have these conversations. Sunny nods, but her expression is serious. No one's asking for performance. We're asking for partnership. Robert softens slightly. Then invite me to the table. A ripple of reaction goes through the audience. Sunny blinks. You're at the table. He gestures lightly around him. This table. Joy laughs. Well played. Sunny exhales slowly. So what does partnership look like to you? Robert answers without hesitation. Long-term commitments. Funding programs. Mentorship. Opening doors quietly and consistently. Sunny counters immediately. And publicly advocating. For those programs. He nods. When appropriate. She presses. Who decides appropriate? He meets her gaze evenly. I do. That answer creates a split-second silence. Then a mix of applause and low murmurs. Sunny's expression tightens just slightly. That's a lot of control. Robert doesn't blink. It's my name. The temperature rises again. Joy glances between them. We are deep in it today. Whoopi leans forward. Let's remember, this is a conversation. But it no longer feels like a casual segment. It feels like a debate that neither side is willing to step back from. Sunny's voice lowers, steadier. With power comes scrutiny. Robert nods once. And I accept that. But not direction? She asks. I accept guidance, he replies. Not public shaming. The audience gasps softly. Sunny immediately responds. No one here is shaming you. Robert's tone remains calm but firm. The implication that I'm comfortable with injustice because I'm not loud enough feels like that. The room goes very quiet. Whoopi watches closely. Sunny's eyes narrow slightly, not angrily, focused. If that's how it landed, that wasn't my intent. Robert nods once. Intent matters. So does impact. The audience reacts audibly to that line. Joy whispers, okay, now we're quoting accountability language. A few nervous laughs. Sunny sits back for a moment, recalibrating. The tension hasn't broken. It's evolved. And you can feel that this conversation is nowhere near finished. The silence after that line hangs for a second too long for daytime television. Sunny looks down briefly at her notes, then back up at him. Let me clarify something, she says, her tone more measured now. No one here is accusing you of being comfortable with injustice. Robert nods once. Okay, but, she continues, when you say you'll decide when and how to speak, it sounds like you're reserving the right to stay quiet when it's inconvenient. There's a low murmur from the audience. Joy shifts in her chair. I think what she's asking is, where's the line? Robert leans back slightly. The line for me is impact versus optics. Sunny, explain that. Robert folds his hands again. He's calm, but there's a firmness underneath now. Optics is making a statement because everyone expects you to. Impact is sitting down with decision makers and saying, we're doing this differently. One trends for 24 hours. The other changes hiring. A wave of applause rolls through the studio. Sunny nods slowly. But how do people know you're doing that if you never say it? He answers immediately. Why do they need to know? That gets a mixed reaction. Some claps, some audible hum sounds. Sunny raises an eyebrow. Because transparency builds trust. Robert smiles faintly. Transparency also becomes branding. Joy lets out a quick laugh. He's not wrong about that either. Sunny turns slightly toward Joy. But public accountability is part of progress. Robert jumps in gently. Public accountability for actions taken publicly. Yes, Sunny. And systemic injustice is public. Robert. And I've publicly acknowledged it exists. Sunny shakes her head slightly. Acknowledging isn't the same as challenging. The audience reacts louder this time. Robert leans forward again. I have challenged it. Maybe not in the way you prefer. But I have. Sunny doesn't look convinced. When? There's that direct tone again. Robert pauses. On projects where I had leverage. Sunny presses. That's still vague. Joy exhales. We're really cross-examining today. A few audience laughs break out. Sunny stays composed. Specifics matter. Robert's voice drops just slightly. Specifics sometimes involve other people's contracts and private negotiations. The audience quiets again. Sunny responds, so we're supposed to take it on faith? Robert holds her gaze. Yes. That lands heavy. A ripple of reactions spreads through the room. Sunny leans back. That's difficult for a lot of people. Robert nods. I understand that. But you can see how it feels, she continues. A powerful white actor saying, trust me, I'm handling it privately. There's a collective intake of breath from the audience. Joy softly says, okay. Robert doesn't flinch, but his expression hardens slightly. You're framing this as racial. Sunny responds immediately, it is racial. A few audience members clap. Robert keeps his voice steady. It's also structural, and political, and economic. Sunny, race is part of the structure. Robert, absolutely. Sunny, then why hesitate to name it? Robert answers calmly. I'm not hesitating to name it. I'm hesitating to turn myself into the spokesperson for it. The audience reacts again, louder applause this time. Joy nods. That's fair. Sunny responds. No one's asking you to be the spokesperson. We're asking you to stand beside those who are. Robert tilts his head. And I do. Sunny, publicly? He exhales. Sometimes. There's that word again. Sunny gives a small, almost frustrated smile. You see how that sounds? Robert's tone sharpens just slightly. I also see how this sounds, like no matter what I say, it won't be enough. The audience murmurs loudly. Whoopi finally steps in more firmly. Let's slow this down. The room quiets. Whoopi looks at Sunny. I think what he's saying is he doesn't want to perform activism. Sunny nods. And I'm saying activism sometimes requires visibility. Robert responds quickly. Visibility can overshadow the cause. Sunny counters, or it can amplify it. The exchange is quicker now. Less space between sentences. Robert, not if the headline becomes about me. Sunny, it already is. That line hits. The audience reacts with a loud mix of applause and surprised laughter. Robert gives a tight smile. That's not something I can control. Sunny, you control whether you show up. Robert's jaw tightens again. I'm here. Sunny shakes her head. On this show. I mean in the broader fight. Robert leans in. Sunny, with respect, you don't see the meetings I'm in. You don't see the checks I write. You don't see the calls I make. Sunny replies calmly. And that's my point. The tension spikes again. Joy mutters under her breath. This is intense. A few nervous laughs ripple through the audience. Sunny continues. We don't see it. So when people question your commitment, that's why. Robert's voice is still controlled, but it's firmer now. So your solution is what? Announce every donation? Post every conversation? Sunny, no. But when national conversations erupt, silence from influential figures is noticeable. Robert responds quickly. And when influential figures speak without full understanding, it can do harm. The audience claps loudly at that. Sunny doesn't back down. Are you suggesting you don't understand racial inequity? Robert pauses. I'm suggesting I don't live it. The room goes very still. Sunny studies him carefully. Robert continues. I can empathize. I can support. But I can't claim ownership of an experience that isn't mine. There's strong applause now. Joy nods. That's an honest answer. Sunny takes a breath. No one's asking you to claim ownership. We're asking you to leverage proximity. Robert responds immediately. And I do. Sunny's tone sharpens slightly. Then why resist being clearer about it? He looks directly at her. Because clarity can turn into commodification. That line triggers another loud reaction from the crowd. Sunny blinks. Commodification. Robert nods. Turning justice into marketing. Joy lets out a quiet, wow. Sunny folds her hands. So you think public advocacy is marketing? I think it can become that, he says evenly. Especially in Hollywood. There's scattered applause. Sunny looks around the table. But if everyone thinks that way, nothing changes publicly. Robert responds without missing a beat. Public change follows private groundwork. Sunny shakes her head. That sounds like delay. Robert's voice lowers slightly. It sounds like patience. The audience splits again, applause from some, murmurs from others. Whoopi looks between them. We are right at the edge of our break. But no one moves. Sunny gives one more push. Let me ask you this. If a young actor of color watching right now feels like the system isn't built for them, what would you say? The room quiets completely. Robert doesn't answer immediately. He takes a breath. I'd say, he begins slowly, the system wasn't built for fairness. It was built for power. And power shifts when enough people demand it. Sunny listens closely. And I'd tell them, he continues, find allies who are willing to risk comfort. Hold them accountable. But also let them do the work in ways that are sustainable. There's a steady wave of applause. Sunny nods slightly. And are you one of those allies? Robert meets her gaze. Yes. The audience applauds louder. Sunny holds eye contact a moment longer, then says quietly, then people will keep watching. That line lands differently, not combative but pointed. The tension hasn't exploded. It hasn't dissolved either. It's sitting right there in the middle of the table. And as the cameras stay tight on both of them, you can tell this final stretch before break might push it even further. The applause lingers as the camera widens slightly. You can feel everyone in the studio waiting to see if it cools down or flares back up. Whoopi looks toward the audience, then back at the table. All right, we've got about 5 minutes before we wrap. Joy exhales dramatically. Only 5. The audience laughs, tension breaking just a little. Sunny looks at Robert again, calmer now but still firm. I want to make something clear. This wasn't about attacking you. Robert nods once. I didn't take it as an attack. A few audience members murmur, some surprised. Sunny tilts her head slightly. You did use the word shaming. He responds evenly. I said it felt like the implication leaned that way. But I understand the intention. There's a subtle shift. Less edge. More clarity. Whoopi nods approvingly. That's what real dialogue looks like. Sunny folds her hands. The reason these questions matter is because influence matters. When someone at your level speaks, or doesn't, it shapes culture. Robert listens without interrupting. And, she continues, for communities that have historically been excluded, visibility from allies isn't performance. It's reassurance. The audience applauds softly. Robert takes a breath. That's fair. That word again, fair. He continues, and I don't dismiss that. I just resist the idea that volume equals virtue. Joy points lightly at him. That's going on a t-shirt. Laughter spreads through the studio. Robert allows himself a small smile. It shouldn't. Sunny smiles faintly too. Let me ask you something more personal then. He nods. Has there ever been a moment where you chose not to speak publicly, and later wished you had? The room quiets. This one feels different. Robert pauses longer this time. Yes. That answer catches the audience off guard. Sunny leans in slightly. About what? He shakes his head gently. I'm not going to name the issue. But there were moments where I thought staying strategic was smarter, and later realized that silence created distance. There's a low murmur of understanding from the audience. Sunny nods slowly. That's all people are asking for. Reflection. Robert meets her gaze. Reflection is different from compliance. A ripple of reaction, some applause, some surprised laughs. Sunny smiles slightly. You really don't like being boxed in. He chuckles. I spent enough of my life in boxes. The audience laughs louder at that. Whoopi steps in. Let's acknowledge something. This is what growth sounds like. It's not clean. Applause follows. Joy adds. And it's definitely not quiet. More laughter. Sunny looks back at Robert. I respect you showing up for this. He nods. I respect the questions. Even when they're uncomfortable. That earns a round of applause, stronger now. But then Sunny adds one final point. Just know, people will keep expecting more. Robert doesn't hesitate. Good. The audience claps loudly at that. Pressure creates movement, he adds. Joy raises her eyebrows. Okay, philosopher. Laughter again. Whoopi glances toward the camera. And that's why we invite people here. Not just to promote projects, but to talk. The applause swells as the segment begins to wrap. But the energy is different than when it started. It's heavier, sharper, more real. As the show cuts to a brief closing segment, you can see the body language shift. Robert leans back, exhales. Sunny adjusts her notes. Joy whispers something to Whoopi off mic that makes her smirk. When the cameras finally go wide for the closing credits, the audience is still buzzing. And that's when things move beyond the studio. Within minutes of the episode airing, clips begin circulating online. Short segments of Robert saying, "Nuance goes to die," and "I'd rather disappoint people with honesty than please them with performance," start trending. Some viewers praise him for staying composed under pressure. Others argue Sunny asked the necessary questions that many celebrities avoid. Hashtags begin forming. His name, the show's name, debates about activism and performative allyship. Clips of Sunny pressing him. Is it more comfortable? Are replayed over and over. Supporters call it accountability journalism. Critics call it an ambush. By that afternoon, commentary channels are breaking down the exchange frame by frame. Entertainment reporters mention the tense moment on The View, highlighting the clash between Robert Downey Jr. and Sunny Hostin as one of the most heated cultural debates on daytime television this year. Sources close to the production later say there was no backstage argument. No shouting. No dramatic walk-offs. In fact, after the cameras stopped rolling, Robert reportedly shook Sunny's hand. One staff member says the two continued talking off-camera for several minutes. Quieter, more conversational. Sunny later addresses the exchange briefly on her social feed, writing that difficult conversations are necessary for progress. Robert doesn't post immediately. That silence, it fuels even more discussion. Commentators split into camps. Some say he masterfully turned the pressure back onto the hosts. Others argue Sunny refused to let celebrity charm deflect systemic questions. Clips rack up millions of views overnight. The next morning, radio shows are debating whether public figures owe public advocacy. Late-night hosts even reference the exchange in their monologues. But what stands out most isn't a meltdown. It isn't shouting. It's the control. He didn't explode. She didn't back down. And the audience witnessed something rare for daytime TV: sustained disagreement without theatrics. In a later interview promoting his film, Robert briefly references the moment, saying, "Live conversations are messy. That's okay." He doesn't criticize the show. Sunny, on the following episode, says, We invite strong voices to this table because our audience deserves real dialogue. No apologies from either side. No retractions. Just a moment that sparked conversation far beyond one segment. And that's the thing about live television. Sometimes the most impactful moments aren't planned. They unfold when two strong perspectives refuse to soften for comfort. What started as a promotional appearance turned into a national debate about influence, responsibility, and the cost of speaking up. Some viewers say he humiliated the hosts with sharp responses and composure. Others say the hosts did exactly what journalists are supposed to do: press for clarity. Either way, it became one of those moments people keep replaying. Now we want to hear from you. Do you think Robert handled the pressure the right way? Was Sunny pushing accountability, or pushing too hard? Should celebrities be louder about social issues, or does quiet action matter more? Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to Echo Stars for more real talk show stories.